In this series of videos, we'll look at the foreign policy of Presidents Bill Clinton, who was president from 1992 election through the 2000 election, and President George W. Bush, who was president from the 2000 election to the 2008 election. These two presidents were the first two presidents in the post-Cold War era, after the Berlin Wall had fallen during the presidency of George Herbert Walker Bush. And they're the presidents that are going to be involved in the war on terror. Clinton took office in early 1993, about 2 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, and it appeared at the time that the United States was the world's dominant superpower. And many people were optimistic. They thought it would herald a new era of peace and prosperity globally. The end of the Cold War, however, was still challenging. Newly freed countries had to adapt to independence, and there was no more control of the Eastern Bloc, and in many areas, religious and ethnic disputes exploded. Trying to negotiate new trading agreements in the New World Order, the post-Cold War world, occupied a great deal of the Clinton administration's foreign policy. George Bush had negotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, but his Senate hadn't yet ratified it. Clinton, who was a New Democrat, as mentioned in earlier videos, was a more moderate, also supported free trade and globalization, and so his administration encouraged ratification. Opposition to the treaty's ratification, however, crossed party boundaries, as many labor unions and many environmentalists who were long Democratic supporters still fought ratification. As the Senate debated, Vice President Al Gore and businessman Ross Perot staged a well-viewed debate on Larry King Live on cable news network CNN. In the end, the Senate ratified NAFTA. By 2000, Clinton had negotiated approximately 300 new trade agreements. His administration first granted the People's Republic of China, newly open to a level of free market investment and participation, most favored nation status, and later, full trade relations. Not surprisingly, trade with China exploded. But, there was also the fact that as trade exploded, many American companies began to move their manufacturing abroad. Now, at this time, most Americans hoped that as China opened itself to a level of capitalism, democracy would inevitably follow. You can't have capitalism and not have a democracy, was the thinking. In the years since then, since the Clinton administration, I don't know, this hope is not very, people aren't as optimistic. The hope appears crushed as China's now matured economy, coupled with an efficient authoritarianism, perhaps poses the America's greatest post-war challenge. One of the areas where there was a lot of regional turmoil in the post-Cold War age was in the East Africa, the so-called Horn of Africa. In the country of Somalia it was pretty much a full-fledged civil war with the warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid waging a war against the government. And the United Nations had sent in military forces, peacekeepers, and as part of that force there were 4,000 Americans serving to keep the peace there. In October 1993, Clinton launched a raid on the Somali capital Mogadishu to capture the warlord Aidid. The mission failed miserably. As part of the mission, a military Black Hawk helicopter went down in the city, and the soldiers were surrounded by hostile Somali citizens and Aidid's followers, and a firefight resulted. And anyway, as a result of that, 18 American lives were lost, and some of the Somali people, Aidid's followers, dragged dead American bodies through the streets. It was embarrassing early for the Clinton administration. By the way, it resulted in a movie being made, you may have seen, called Black Hawk Down. In the end, the Somali leaders signed a peace agreement early in 1994, and Clinton very quickly removed the rest of the American peacekeeping forces. In April 1994, in Central Africa, the Hutu of Rwanda engaged in a genocide against the minority Tutsi, killing 800,000 over the Tutsi over 3 months. The UN sent in a force to try to stop the killing, but the U.S. had no strategic interest in the area, And I think, without a doubt, they were undoubtedly still burned by the Somali incident, so they were hesitant. Anyway, the U.S. didn't participate in the UN mission to stop the genocide that was taking place against the Tutsi. Clinton later said that this was one of his administration's greatest regrets because they didn't help in the slaughter. In Haiti, in the Caribbean, a military junta had staged a coup against the democratically elected leader Jean-Bertrand Aristide in 1991. Thousands of Haitians were fleeing to the United States, and Clinton wanted Aristide restored, and he wanted the whole country restored. Again, however, the Somali experience and public opposition to any military efforts kept Clinton from sending in American troops. Still, Clinton threatened to send in American troops if both sides didn't negotiate. And in the end, they actually did, and they were able to get Aristide restored and order reestablished. This concludes the first of the two videos on Clinton's foreign policy.